What's up, world? It's Katrina,
And Marlena, and this is Excess Baggage.
the podcast where two friends in their 30s unpack all of life's baggage. This episode, we will be unpacking father wounds.
Okay, let's start the show.
Hey, girl.
Hello.
It's been a minute.
It has been a minute. How are you?
I am here. I am here. What is your baggage today?
Well, I don't know if it's today or if it's a combination of things, but I feel that my mind has been going a million miles a minute. I've been thinking about I was listening to something during a walk because I go on long walks sometimes, and I go on long walks on the beach. No, but I was listening, and this person said, like, how do you want to feel? You know, your life a lot of times should be revolved around how you want to feel.
Sure.
And I try my best to feel good, but just like anybody else, I have days when I don't feel so good, and I get really, in my head and just, negative self-talk for no reason.
Sure.
And I've just been, I would say, in the last week or so, turning the page of just like, no, how do you want to feel? Do you want to feel good? Like, okay, do you want to feel like you have more money in your pocket? Like, okay, so what is the plan? Like, I create a lot of plans in my life, but not necessarily plans for my life.
That's a really good distinction.
And I'm really good at, getting things taken care of, especially when I'm tapping into a group. I'm trying to make sure the group is happy. What do I think the collective,
Right.
what are they gonna, how are they going to feel, and not necessarily about me. Like, yes, of course, there will be some stuff in there about me because just I like things the way I like them. And, it might be something specific that I know it's like, okay, that was for you, but it really is for, the group or the community, and how it's going to play. How are things going to play out? And that's not necessarily what I do for my future and how I want things to look. I do a lot of stuff. I do a lot of, I try my best to stay up on, being mindful and, living in gratitude, and, also being compassionate enough to know that we're all trying to figure it out, and each person is the main star of their own show. That's just the way that it is. But how we have access to one another and what we do with said things, sometimes it's not really good for you. And so I'm just trying to think about and move in a direction that is forward, because I spent a lot of time dredging up not even dredging up the past, but thinking about how I could have did things differently, and not recognizing, like, yes, that is how it was then, but this is how it is now. So staying present, I might be good at because I can stay present in what I am creating, the scenario that I'm creating in my mind. And not necessarily being present in, like, hey, yes, stay present, but like your future is just as important as that feeling of, I feel good right now. But it's like, okay, yes, I feel good right now, but when the doors are closed and I'm by myself,
what else?
What else is going to keep you going? What is going to drive you? And so I'm really trying to step into a clear, even more clear, because I imagine where I am right now, of course, but I just want to be more clear. And I feel like my baggage is just dealing with that, and not being able to deal with it, and not stick in my past ways or just completely fall apart altogether, because I have those moments, you know, and while I hold it all together and may seem like the strong friend and the strong person, there's a lot of baggage behind that, people pleasing and face of that I've been trained in a way to, you know, how to present myself.
Right.
So, you know, that stems from so many things, but
right,
particularly, you know, particularly a lot just being Black in general, you know,
right.
just we're good at masking a lot of pain.
Because we have to be, right.
So yeah, I don't know. I feel good. I feel like it's turning around. There was a lot of baggage these last, I would say, month. It's been a lot of baggage, but I am hoping for the best, just like everybody else, I guess.
Absolutely. That's a lot. But I'm glad that you're in a place of being mindful, but also contemplating and being present in the thought process. Because sometimes, sometimes we're just moving and we're not present in what's happening. And at least if we have awareness and are able to say, like, okay, like this is what's happening and this is how I want to shift, even if we don't do it yet, like that's a step in the right direction. So hopefully it'll start to shift.
Yeah, that's all I can hope for.
Right.
I'm not even, of course, I'm hopeful that it all works out, you know, of course, but I'm hoping for just the shift to take place. I'm not even in the place of saying like, yeah, I'm in the place, of course, you know, even starting to even dream again, because I had gotten to a place where, okay, I can take care of myself. I can do a lot of things or whatnot. And I got really comfortable. And so I wasn't really dreaming of possibilities in my career. I was not really dreaming of possibilities in my love life. I was not dreaming about any type of possibilities. Like you said, I was just in it, you know,
just
and I'm
moving,
just moving. And so I feel like now I'm like, okay, you know, when we turn another year, you know, and I just had a birthday, you know, not that long ago. It hasn't been that long. When you turn that other year, it's like, yeah, it's a sense of reflection, of course, but it's the reflection. I'm just like, okay, I can reflect all day.
Right.
Like what you're going to have better times in order to have those, like, what's up? You know, that's basically what it is.
In order to have them, you got to show up.
Yeah, you got to show up. So anyway, that was long-winded, but that is where my mind has been, or where I'm training my mind to make a leap.
Okay. Keep us updated.
Oh, you know, I'm sure one of these
episodes will bring it right back
something. I'll be like, you know,
now that you mention it.
Right. What about you? What's your baggage?
So I was thinking about this as we were logging in and getting ready. And I was like, what is my baggage? I feel like so much has happened that like I'm not even processing all the things that have happened. And so like I am in this place and my baggage is very surface level, but also maybe the baggage is the fact that I'm not processing in this moment and I'm just kind of like here and present. Because I was like, what's my baggage? I was like, my baggage is hot as shit and I ain't got no fans. And the reason that is baggage is because every year since I moved into this place, I've been telling myself I was going to buy fans. And why? I don't know. 4 years in, I still ain't got no fans. I don't know. That's beyond me. But
okay.
4 years in, summer comes every year. And there still ain't no fans in this piece.
Like as we're speaking right now, there's no fans?
The fan that's sitting next to me is borrowed from my mama as of this week.
Okay. So You Amazon a lot of stuff. You can Amazon.
Ma'am, I don't know. Okay. Like, I don't have.
That's all I'm going to say. I'm not going to say nothing else.
Ma'am, when I tell you it makes no sense.
I'm pretty sure you live by a Costco too.
Ma'am, Costco, Lowe's, Home Depot, Target, like. When I tell you it makes no sense.
Right.
I've been home for about a week. It's been hot as shit for about a week.
Yeah, my pits are sweating right now. Like as we're talking. And I don't even know why. Like, I mean, I do. It's probably like 90 degrees outside. I don't even know. But I know it's hot. And you know, it's natural girls or whatever. It's like, I'm pretty sure that I smell good because I took a shower this morning, but at the same time, I'm like,
but it's hot.
It's hot. And I'm sweating.
And your body is going to sweat.
Yeah. And I'm not with it. But I knew it was going to be hot this morning because I went for a walk and I could tell, first of all, I never seen this many people out at the same time that early. So that I'm like, oh, it's going to be hot because everyone's getting their walks in now.
Early.
And it's like 9 a.m. And I'm like, usually there don't be nobody fucking outside. Like, zero people. Everyone was out with their dogs. Like, they're like, let's get this shit in now. Because guess what? We chilling.
Clearly, that's not Katrina. Because I know it's going to be hot every fucking year. Summer comes around the same time every year. And I still ain't got no fans in this piece.
And we live in Los Angeles.
And we live in Los Angeles. It is warm a lot of the time. So I have been talking to myself about that because why I have no fans in my home makes zero sense. And I've lived here for several years at this point. So that is what I'm claiming as my baggage in this moment because I feel like that is really ridiculous. And I've been talking to myself about it. But I also recognize that there is some other baggage that's probably more like mental, emotional baggage sitting in the background somewhere. But we ain't dealing with that yet. Like, we're just not there right now.
Okay. That's good. Amen. At least you know.
I am fully aware that there's some shit back there we gotta dig up eventually, but you know, we get there when we get there. For now, we're gonna drink some tequila and record this podcast.
I'm real done. Anyway, but today's topic is father wounds. Our last episode was in May, and we talked about the mamas. And
the mother wounds.
Now we're here, and it's June.
We're gonna talk about the daddy wounds.
We are. And before we get into that, though, I find it very. I'm just like, wow, like, you know how they make these jokes about how like Mother's Day, everybody goes above and beyond, and Father's Day, you know, they get like, you know, maybe
ties,
socks.
Right.
Some shit that like but I even think about like, damn, this weekend is Juneteenth and it's all these Juneteenth like celebrations and all this stuff.
The daddy
like, there ain't no daddy. I've seen like barely any Father's Day things, barely.
Yeah.
But you know what that's about. New holiday, you know.
Yeah.
New phone, who this? Everybody wants to hop on. So yeah, I'm actually thinking about going. There's like something at the Hollywood Bowl or something
for Juneteenth.
For Juneteenth, and it's supposed to be like the first all Black orchestra to play the Hollywood Bowl, and it's gonna be televised on CNN and all this stuff. Like, what the fuck? I'm like, I low-key want to go just because I'm like, really, what are they gonna be doing up there? I'm really interested.
That is very interesting. I hope that's. I just want to believe that all of this stuff ain't for show.
I really hope so as well.
I hope they're getting the recognition that they want, need, and deserve, that they're just not being put on a stage for some clout. Like, I hope, because I'm sure this orchestra been around for a minute. Like,
I know. But there's like all these, you know, celebrities and stuff, and Jhené Aiko and all these people performing. And
it sounds like a good time.
It sounds like a good time. I'm just wondering, like, what are they going to be saying in between?
Right.
How is this going to be a teachable thing?
And is it for Juneteenth, or y'all just doing it this weekend because it's a Black orchestra?
That I don't know. No. I think it's for Juneteenth. No, I think it definitely is for that. I don't know. I'm interested to see where this goes. I am. But anyway, it's Father's Day too. So it's like, okay. Again, but dads don't give a fuck. I think either they do or they don't.
Yeah, I think I feel the same way about mamas though. Like, because some people care and some people don't.
True, but I would say more mothers probably care than fathers care, because I feel like they know that usually they're not going to get shit. So
that's a problem,
right? So maybe
is it that they don't care, or that they've just written off that they don't get as much? So
I don't know. Maybe we'll put a poll up on our Instagram or something, or on Spotify, and find out, if there's any dads out there listening. Do you guys care if you get treated right on Father's Day, or are you like, I don't care because I know you was going to give me shit anyway, and you know what? Why get my hopes up? So I've trained myself not to care. Or would you like to get some recognition?
Yeah.
And not just because you have a baby either, but you're an actual
parent, right?
I'm just wondering, curious.
Yeah. That's really interesting though, to think about the way, as we're talking about father wounds, like the way that even society approaches fatherhood versus motherhood, and how much of that, it makes me wonder, obviously, my psychology brain goes to like, how much of that contributes to the reason why people have father wounds, and how fathers show up in the home and things of that nature, especially Black fathers. It just makes me wonder, like, how much of our father wounds and the ways that men behave in the home or with their children is a contribution of society, and how we are socialized to believe that fathers are not as important, or even in our celebration of fatherhood versus motherhood, that like in society it's just not taken as seriously. I don't know. It just makes me wonder, like, how much of that also contributes to how men behave in the home, especially Black men, how they show up in their homes, how they show up with their children. And, those behaviors are what then creates father wounds. So I don't know. It's interesting to think about from that perspective of like how society even socializes us to look at the difference between fathers and mothers.
Yeah. I was thinking about how fathers, when you're saying how they, act in the home. And I was thinking about, would it be, I don't want to say correct. It could be an opinion. Maybe I don't know if it's mine, but it's an opinion that if a guy had a good father growing up, that maybe he took that father being good for granted. And so in turn, maybe not a great father to their offspring, but I feel like someone who did have a father who was, an asshole, they had some, serious issues with their father. I feel like those people turn out to be sometimes better fathers, because they're just like, no, like I went through that whole like, oh, I'm a disciplinarian and I'm here to, discipline kid, but not really have a relationship with them. And I don't want to have that same relationship with my kid. I want them to be able to come to me regardless if they did something bad or whatever the case may be. And just, I want to have that open dialogue and be able to have a better relationship with my kid versus, whatever they grew up with, and I don't want to say that's an opinion or something. Just something I'm thinking of, like, could that be a reason why people father the way that they do?
I think that definitely could be a reason, but I don't think that is exclusive, right? Like, it's not that, not that you're saying this, but it's not that every person who had a bad father is going to become a better father, and every person who had a good father is not going to be a good father. I think the reasons why people become the types of parent they become is vast. And I think those could be some of the reasons. And I think that goes for the same for mothers and other ways that we behave in society and in the world and in our roles and all of that kind of stuff. But I definitely think sometimes the way that we are presenting ourselves as adults is in general to combat what we experience as children or to lean further into what we experience as children. And yeah, I think that leans into parenthood for sure. I've never heard that specifically applied to parenthood, especially to men and fatherhood, which is interesting. But I think human behavior across the board, yeah, that's how we learn.
True. Yeah.
So that makes sense.
So what would you say would be some father wounds? And how do you know you got them?
We talked about this in the mother wound episode, but you know, when you show up in relationships with either your father figures, or men in particular in a certain kind of way, and there's like a patterned behavior in that, there's probably something related to father wounds that is bringing that up. It could also be related to past relationships. Let's not get that misconstrued. Yeah. But if there is something around a pattern of how you see men and how you engage with men, then there's a high likelihood that there's something going on there that could stem from relationship with your father growing up, or the lack thereof, right? Because father wounds can be abandonment wounds, like he was not present. That could be physically. He could be present physically, but not emotionally or mentally. That could be the nigga just wasn't around at all. Or that could be he just, didn't show up when you needed him in really particular moments. That could be he was around, but he wasn't in the home. That could also bring up some abandonment stuff where like you here, but you ain't here.
Right.
And what does that look like? And sometimes it's not even like you're not in the home, like you live somewhere else, but like you work in 15 jobs and I don't ever see you.
Yep.
I think those are the ones that I think we hear about a lot, are like the neglect, the daddy not being around, daddy not being present, not being emotionally available, like all of that. I think those can be wounds. We were talking off the air about father as a disciplinarian too. And I think that's a huge wound. Like if in the home, he is required to always be the person who is doing the disciplining and not able to show up as like the caregiver and, the nurturer, any of those other things, whether he's making that choice or it's been given to him, that can be a huge wound as well.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I think, I've had experience in that department where, I didn't feel like, I felt like when it came to discipline, if you were not there normally, like in the household, like you were saying, it's kind of hard to take it as serious, especially if you don't feel like, that person knows the day to day or knows what's going on and really is keeping, up with you.
Right.
So yeah. And it depends, like, I don't know. And people discipline differently as well.
Absolutely.
And so, not every father disciplines the same way, but I know what you mean, as in like they can tap into, they're basically sent in to do the dirty work. It's like if it's the arguments and then, AKA so-called nagging from mom doesn't work, then it's like, okay, we're sending in the big guns and it's serious. Right. But for me, it was very hard to take it serious, just because of the way that the situation was at hand. So,
right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I would say that across for every father figure in my life as well. I wouldn't even say just my father. I would say just men in my life, they worked. They were gone a lot of the times. And, a lot of the, time that I did get, which I was thankful that, my grandmother was able to be at home and like to have that experience where it's like, okay, you have that. That was a real hands-on experience. I never felt like uncared for.
Right.
So, and you can't say that a lot for most people because they do have working parents and their parents have to get babysitters and, look into daycare and things like that. And it happens like that because how America's set up. Shit. You got to do what you got to do. So, yeah, I don't know.
I think I definitely had a mix of both growing up, where like my father, he was definitely more of the disciplinarian. And I think some of that I think is just natural to some degree. My daddy had a deeper voice. So when he got a little bit more serious about something, like you kind of like perked up, like, oh, okay. But my mom also disciplined us because my father, at certain points in my life, not always, but at certain points in my life, worked 2 and 3 jobs. And so she would have to discipline us a lot of the time. But I do think it impacted to some degree, especially when I became a teenager and I was out here, acting a little wild. I think it impacted my relationship with my father to some degree, where we were at odds more because of that, because he was the one who would have to step in and like handle things. And also because my father and I, everyone that knows me can tell you I am my father's child. I look like the man. We have very similar personality traits. We have very like similar interests to some degree, or the way that we like see the world to some degree. I think my vision is a little bit more expansive to some degree. Some of that being because I'm a woman, some of that generationally, all of that. But like I am my father to a T. And that did not go over well when I became a teenager and wanted to have voice and like was expressing in ways that maybe weren't the most appropriate for the situation. And so that definitely kind of, I think, tore into our relationship and created some wounds there, because he was constantly the person that I had to like feel like I was in battle with, I guess. In a way that I wasn't with my mom, because I just wasn't. I didn't have to be. And because my mom responded to me differently. So even when my mom was disciplining me, it just went differently. Whereas like when my dad tried to discipline me, we was just like, I don't know, at odds, because we were the same person. That just didn't work.
Yeah. I think that for me, I needed a balance. I was raised by my grandparents, my father's parents. And so I saw my father a lot. It's not like he was not around. I would never say that. But I think as he was growing up, as I was growing up, he was growing up as well.
Right.
And so, while I feel like my grandfather, which I saw regularly, but again, he was also working all the time. He owned his own business. He had to take care of things. But I did feel that my grandfather made me feel special. And I felt like my father, it's not that he didn't make me feel special. I would say that because we thought differently, I felt like I was an odd, like the oddball, or I was, different, so to speak. And I always felt like he, in a way, and this is a bad analogy, but like he's the cool kid and I'm kind of like the one that's like, well, I know some things too. And they're like, yeah, you don't, what, it's kind of like that.
Yeah.
And so I feel like our relationship a lot of the time, while he did give me life. I feel a lot of times he's more of like the way we have discussions or talks or stuff like that. A lot of times, I would say it was more like a brother, although he's not, like I'm clear on the roles.
Right. But it felt different.
It just felt different. And it's just the way how I entered into the world and the way that I was brought up. And that's just the way that our family dynamic is.
Right.
I didn't know. I can't say that I liked it. At times, yes, but at other times, no. And but I a long time ago just accepted it.
Right.
And even if I share any type of frustration with anything, I also feel like it's like, look, you can continue on and you can choose to have a relationship. I always felt like choose to have the relationship, even if the relationship may not be what you want it to be. Maybe one day it will be what you want it to be. But I feel like I said, I feel like as he was growing, as I was growing up, he was also growing up. So you
had to come to accept that he may not be what you were looking for or expecting in a father in that moment because he didn't have the capacity.
Yeah,
but isn't that the case for all of our parents?
It's true. No, right. It is. It really is for all of our parents. That's why
all of our caregivers on every level, like they are also growing as we are growing.
Definitely, and I, like I said in the last episode, about mother wounds, like I definitely have had my share of wounds all around. So, but those things don't define, they define me in a way like, yes, they happen, but they don't define me as in like who I am and who I'm changing into being.
Right. Because that's a part of the healing, is recognizing this is something that happened and this is a part of who I am or how I was raised, but that doesn't have to be who I am in the day-to-day or how I move through the world. And I think a big part of my healing from my father wounds was coming to that exact realization that you were just talking about, of like, this man was still growing up. Like he was still figuring life out. He was still trying to figure out himself with a child now, right? And a child, no less, that was mirroring all of his shit back to him. Like there's some stuff in that, and to be able to like see him as a human being and being able to say, okay, like he was also growing and he did the best that he could, and maybe that didn't always show up in the ways that I expected or needed or desired, but that I don't have to let that continue to be my narrative. I don't have to let that continue to be how I show up in the world. That I can release that and I can be thankful for the ways that he showed up that felt good, and even to some degree be thankful for the ways that he showed up that I don't want to repeat because they did not feel good.
No, 100%. I felt like for me, I felt when I heard like father wounds, daddy wounds, whatever you want to call them, of course I think about, what people always, I feel a lot of times when women, date a certain way or meet a certain person, they always stigmatize them and say immediately, oh, she has daddy
issues. Right.
Right. And while in some extreme cases that can be true, I think for me, I've thought about that. I've definitely thought about it and really, tried to have a serious conversation with myself as to like, okay, you keep dating the same type of person. They kind of in some ways remind you of your father. But I didn't know if that was a coincidence. I didn't know if that was just
right.
I didn't know if that was just by chance. I didn't know what it was. I knew what I was getting into, and I knew that there was, a version of myself that was trying to, people please a lot.
Absolutely.
But I never thought like, oh, if I dated somebody, you know, in a different age range, like, oh, oh, it must be because she's like got daddy issues. I always thought that was strange.
Yeah.
Because I have dated older guys. And I also feel like it's a part of the fact that I grew up with older people.
Right.
So while to some people it might be like, oh, like, whoa, they're older than you, like they're for real older than you. And I'm like, yeah, but at the same time, there's a type of thing that I feel like that I'm looking for that's not necessarily happening in the other side of the dating pool. I'm not saying it's impossible, but there's just certain things that
there's a higher likelihood over there.
Yeah. Now I know now, like where I'm not going to go anymore. You know, once I've been where I've been, I know where I'm not going to go anymore. But at the same time, I also know, yeah, it's a different generation, and there's just certain things that people do now that don't really vibe with, you know, unless they were raised right. I don't know. There's a lot of people that wasn't raised right. Like, I don't know what's going on out here, but there's a lot of, you know, there's a lot of shit. So I know where I want to be though.
I'm glad you figured that out for you.
Would
you say that is one of the differences in how father wounds has impacted you versus your mother wounds though? Like, would you say that dating is like the way that your father wounds show up differently?
Yeah, I would say that, because I mean, honestly, it's both, because I talked about earlier, like the way I communicate. You know,
right.
I got the way that I communicate, I learned from my mother. You know, I learned from my grandmother. I learned how to communicate through her. And so I would say it's all kind of wrapped it up into it. I wouldn't just say it's like, oh, this is what I'm looking for, or, you know, it's this particular wound. I feel like it's all integrated. You know, it's all integrated. Because if I communicated a certain way, you know what I mean, certain things would be quite different.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think my father wounds have shown up more in dating, but I also think part of that is because there was a long time where I didn't realize that I had mother wounds. That is something that I came to in my 30s and didn't realize prior to then. But I think my father wounds popped up very clearly in the way of me for a while, maybe not even consciously, not dating men that were like me, because I felt like we couldn't get along. Like it was never going to work. Because I had so many moments of that with my dad where, and don't get me wrong, like my dad and I get along really well a lot of the time, but when we bump heads, and it's like a battle. And so I felt like I don't want that type of relationship in dating. And so I think very unconsciously, I was choosing men that were like completely different from me. I didn't want to date nobody that was like anything like me. And that was very unconscious for a while. And I think a pattern I recognized at some point, but it also wasn't working for me because some of the men I was dating, they just, you know, they were too different. It just wasn't a good fit. But I think that showed up more than my mother wounds. But I also think some of that is just because I didn't know I had those wounds from my mom.
Right. You did say that. You did.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would say one of the ways that it shows up definitely is, you know, I do need quality time with my partner. And I do feel like that stems from not even so much a father wound, but it kind of stems from the fact that, like, yeah, the time that I did get to spend with my grandfather, the times that I did get to spend with my father, like I really cherished those times. And so I know that like quality time is really important to me, because if I don't have it, then I do start to feel like I'm being abandoned. Like, you know, and that's not a good feeling. It really isn't. And I'm not even so much of saying like, oh, I'm clingy, I need to talk, I need to be with this person every second of the day, or nothing along those lines. Nothing along those lines. Trust me. It's not. But I feel like, making the time, or following through, like those types of things became really important to me in my relationships, because there are times when that did not happen for me.
Absolutely.
So, or maybe they follow, I'll say, I won't even say not follow through. I would say happening on their timetable. You know what I mean? Without, and that would always to me be kind of like, okay, that's strange.
Yeah.
So in my relationships, I'm like, nah, like I don't really want that, because if it's only on your timetable, my timetable is never gonna, like, nothing about it is ever gonna be a sense of urgency.
Right. This makes my mind go to the place of also like how much of our wounds is created because of a certain level of a certain dynamic between parent and child, regardless of who the parent is. And so to some degree, there's like this authoritarian way of being as a parent. I'm the parent, you're the child, you do as I say. And so as a parent, yeah, things are going to be on my time. And that may not be exactly what the dynamic was. They may have been on their own time for other reasons, but it also makes me wonder like how much of our wounds can also be created just because of the dynamic of parent and child, not necessarily because anything wrong is happening, but I'm the parent. Like, we have to consider my time before we consider anybody else's time, because I have the most going on and I'm the one who controls the time to some degree of what everybody in the household is doing. And how, as a child, you don't see that. You don't understand that. You're not behind the scenes seeing everything that goes into that. And so you're just kind of like, oh, like my time is never considered, and how that can also
but you
become a
can
wound.
feel it.
Right.
And those feelings are not always, I will say the feelings are always valid, but the feelings are not always what you think they are.
Right. They're not always reality of what's happening.
Exactly.
I don't think I've ever thought about like parent wounds in that way, but hearing you say that, it made me reflect on that. And that's interesting. And I think a good thing for us to also, and for the audience also, to think about when we think about the wounds that we have, like how much of that was created because our parents were doing something that wasn't right and didn't feel good. And how much of it was like, this was the dynamic and that's just how we internalized it. And that there was nothing wrong necessarily in the dynamic, but that's just how we internalized it, because we're children and you internalize everything.
It's true. You do.
I like that. I'm going to sit with that for a while.
Yeah. I don't know. I just want everybody, I think for me, the biggest thing is just, I wish that, well, I won't say I wish, I would say recently, in recent times, I've been seeing more men and more Black men being more open about things that they're feeling, and being more open to have conversations and dialogue about different things.
Yes.
And I hope that somehow stems within family dynamics, because a lot of times when you want to have a conversation with your mother or your father, it can be kind of hard for them to hear certain things and not take it like, oh, you're saying that I'm a bad parent. And it's like, no, I'm telling you how I felt in the moment.
Right.
And I'm telling you that like, it is what it is. But if our relationship is going to get better, like it wouldn't, I feel like it would be unnatural not to talk about it.
Sure.
And not even talk about it in an accusatory way, but to say like, yeah, like some of the stuff that happened before really did hurt me.
Right.
And there's an acknowledgement there that can be the window to healing.
Absolutely.
And so I just hope with that wave, that not only for our generation, but the generation after us, and those to come, that there is more open dialogues and there is more open discussion, that like it doesn't come in a place that's coming from like I said, like
pointing fingers
or shaming somebody, but at least having what you're saying actually heard, received, and then thinking of actual items of how we can repair said situation.
Absolutely.
And the repair is not always going to be rough either. I don't even know if it always needs to be like, oh, it's going to take therapy and we're going to have to sit down. Yeah, you know, in some situations, I would say that it could be good, you know, especially to have somebody there that is not necessarily in anybody's corner, but there to
give perspective.
Yeah, to give
validate
and
to honor all sides and offer everything that we are not always able to see because we are just coming from our own perspective.
Right.
Yeah. I too hope that we, especially in the Black community, I always want to say that first and foremost, in the Black community, especially because there's so much hurt and pain. I too hope that we are able to have more of these conversations. And I think sometimes the repair is simply just having that conversation and feeling heard. And when you feel heard, then sometimes the pain, the wound starts to kind of release its toll on you because you're able to just feel seen and heard. And sometimes it's being able to listen to the other side of things, just in the example we were just talking about of like a parent being able to say, I wasn't disregarding your time as much as I just needed to be mindful of time in general. And these are the things that I had going on. I wasn't trying to be, you know, disrespectful to what your wants, needs, and desires were, but this is what I had going on. And so to some degree, like I had to make choices based off of that and how that information can now shift the narrative that is circling in my head around, you know, how you treated me or how you treated my time. But I think just like we talked about in the last episode, that when we don't have the opportunity to have those conversations or that dialogue, or we do, and that person is just not in a place where they're able to hear and validate and be present in that conversation in a way that is nurturing and helpful, then, you know, sometimes we have to take other routes. And I am thankful because I would say when I was ready to start to heal the stuff with my father, I don't think that he was ready. And so it took me having to be in other spaces, be in therapy, have conversations in other spaces so that I could heal myself from the things that took place. And then when my father was ready, you know, we were able to heal our relationship differently because he was able to show up in those conversations differently. But when I was ready in my early 20s, in my late teens, he wasn't there yet. He wasn't, you know, he still had some growing to do for himself. And so sometimes we got to do the work for ourselves, but that also doesn't mean that they'll never come around. I'm very thankful that eventually my father got to the place where we can now have these conversations and be like, no, daddy, you was wrong. Like, or this is how I felt. And he could be like, oh, but that's not what I meant. Like, that's not what was happening. And we can, you know, share that and realize that we were both in our own stuff at the time. And, you know, the healing happens from there. I don't have to do as much of that healing in therapy now because I'm able to have those conversations with him openly. But we don't always get that opportunity. And it's been a minute. It's been a decade before we could get to that place where we could have those conversations.
Right. Yeah, I don't know if I don't presume to know if I will get that chance. I hope that I do.
Yeah.
But I also, there's a lot of stuff there. And, you know, I've always said I can only do so much.
Absolutely.
And so, while yes, I've been in therapy and yes, you know, I deal with, you know, any wounds that I may be experiencing at the time, I don't always tap into certain ones because I may not be ready, or I know, like you said, I'm not sure of the status of the other party.
Right.
You know, So it's like, okay, I can do what I can do, and we can be who we are right now, how we are. And I'm hoping for it to for it to get better, and I
Absolutely.
know that, yeah, it is going to take me wanting to go there and do the hard thing. But I feel like I have been having some, shit with the men department for a while.
Right.
You know, in all aspects of my life. So I feel like right now I'm just like, okay, like I don't really want to deal. I really just want to, like you said, work on myself, heal myself, and I'll come. I'll get there. You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
I am perfectly okay with taking my time.
Absolutely. It didn't take quick seconds for you to get to this place. It's okay to take time to heal from it.
Right.
I also want to say, as a therapist, and I think this is sometimes controversial in our field, I am someone who is of the mindset that healing doesn't always happen in one way. And that what I mean by that is some people believe that you always have to go back and like dig into childhood and do all of these things. And I do think that there is some merit in that, like that there can be a lot that you can do with that, and it can be really beneficial in a lot of ways. I also think that part of healing is sometimes just acknowledging that there's something happening in this moment and shifting it. And so I think sometimes we don't always want to get down to the nitty gritty, the trauma, the wound, the hurt, the whatever. We're just not ready. We don't know that it's there. We don't have access to it. It happened at a young age. It happened in a moment that we blacked out on. Like there's so many reasons why we can't access the past, but it can still be impacting the present. And part of healing can also just happen in the present, where we are aware that there's something happening, aware that it's not something that we want to continue to participate in, and start to create an idea of what it looks like to shift that and then put that into action. And that is just as much healing as going back and touching that wound and opening it up and being in that or whatever. And sometimes we never do that. Sometimes we never are ready. Sometimes we just don't want to. Sometimes that wound is still person to it because it's not healed or scabbed over enough to be able to do that in a healthy way. Sometimes we don't remember. So, I mean, sometimes we just don't have the ability to do that. And sometimes we don't care to. And that all of that can be okay. Sometimes it's starting from now and moving forward. Just like you were talking about in your baggage, like what is the behavior that I'm participating in now? How do I want to shift that, regardless of where it comes from? How do I want to show up now and start making those changes? And sometimes in doing that, we uncover the wound and we heal it from the inside out. But sometimes we just have to like put a dressing on it and like keep it moving. Like it unscabbed over and I'm just not going to pick at it, but I'm going to put some Neosporin on it and a Band-Aid and let it heal from the outside and be done with it. And I think that can be just as beneficial and useful. And so it doesn't have to be that you dig up the wound if you're not ready or if you don't want to.
Yeah.
But making different choices is just as much healing as choosing to dig up the old stuff.
Yeah. Ooh, well.
Oh, child.
That was a lot.
Mm-hmm. Excess baggage.
That's what the show is called.
And we signed up for it.
We did. Yeah. Well, that's that on that. I don't really have anything to add. I will add that I hope that everybody, whatever wound that you do have, you do find some way to,
find peace.
Yeah, to find peace with it, even if you're not ready to deal.
Absolutely. Because if nothing else, you deserve some peace. All right, y'all. This next segment is called Roses. Marlena, who do you want to give your rose to today?
So I'm going to give, since we're talking about fathers, I am going to give my rose out to all of the fathers out there. You guys are so more, I feel like you're more important than you know, especially in a little girl's life, you know, who's eventually going to be a woman in this society, dealing with a lot of men out here that will step on our boundaries and take advantage of us in some of the most intrusive ways. So I really want to shout out the fathers that are there for their daughters, you know, their sons as well, of course, but I'm speaking from being a daughter myself, you know, knowing that you have that security and that comfort within your father, to me, is a big, big thing in our lives. And they really can shift your perspective.
Absolutely.
And how you deal with men. And I feel like a lot of times, I mean, you guys know like women, we know women more because we are women. You guys are men. And so, you know, you might know more and know how a man might think, and you can put your said child up on game, you know, on how to deal in certain scenarios. And I feel like, you know, the ones that are out there that take it serious and really want to be impactful in their children's lives, I salute y'all. I salute my father for trying as best as he could. And I think that and you know, as you grow older, you reflect. And I feel like he wants to be better.
Yeah.
And I hope that happens. Like I'm a cheerleader for that to happen. You know, I'm totally on board with that. And you know, my grandfather, I probably give my rose to him a bunch of times. I don't even know, probably, but I just salute him, as in I knew how I wanted to be treated. Even if I didn't receive said treatment, I do know what it's like to be treated like a lady, to feel that, you know, like I said, that sense of like you feel special.
Right.
And I feel like he poured, you know, coming from the dynamic of being a grandfather, grandkids, of course, come in and it's like a do-over almost. It's like the grandkids can do no wrong, you know, because you know, like you said, every parent goes through their thing. And it's like when you get that do-over, it can be a different scenario. And I feel like my grandfather definitely knows me. And regardless of like him working a million miles a minute, if he could be there, he would be there. If he could give me his last, he would give me his last without even blinking. So shout out to the fathers. And yeah, that's who I'm giving my rose to as well. And I will say that before I pass it on, I will say that what my father, I feel, has given me is fire, yo. It's fire. You know, it's passion. I feel like my passionate part of my personality, and I get that from both of my parents, but I really do feel from my father, there's like a certain fire underneath me or whatever that I know that I got from him. I'm not taking no stuff, you know, both parents, of course, but definitely my father. Absolutely. And you know, there's no denying the things that he has given me. I could never take that away, you know.
Yeah.
From either my grandfather or my father. So shout out to them.
Absolutely.
And Katrina, who are you giving your rose to?
I am going to give my rose to my father. Shout out to all the daddies and all the father figures, but I specifically want to shout out my father. I think you're right. I think they don't get enough credit, I would say, especially in our community. I don't even think it's our community necessarily, but it's the way that our community is depicted, that fathers are not present. They're not in the home. They're always out doing dumb shit or whatever. But that wasn't my experience. And, my father was always there and always in the home, and he didn't always show up in the ways that I would have liked, and wasn't always as emotionally available as I would have wanted or needed. But he was always there. And I got the balance of having a man show up, love me, care for me, be present with me, have conversations with me, and just, play with me and be playful with me. And so he is such a big part of who I am, and how I've become the person that I am. And like I said earlier, I am his child to a T. That man could not deny me if he tried. Not that he would ever try, but I am everything. I am the spitting image of this man in so many different ways. And I know that has created so much trial and tribulation in our relationship, but I'm just thankful to have had the experience of having a father who was present. I want to give my rose to him, not just because of the ways in which he showed up for me, but also because the ways in which I see him growing. I recognize that my father had a lot of internal work that he needed to do as I was growing up, as I'm sure most parents do. But now in my 30s, looking at the relationship I have with him and looking at the conversations that we're able to have and the ways in which we're able to engage, like, I'm very thankful for the ways in which, however it happened, whatever that looked like, whatever energy and effort it took, I'm just thankful for the ways in which he has grown and changed and shifted so that we can now be in a different space. Because I think that too has impacted the way in which I show up in the world and how I am able to continue to heal and move. So thankful for him, especially because I've seen some not so positive father figures and had those around in my life too. But having a positive father figure in my life, I think, has impacted the ways in which I've grown. And I'm proud of him in the ways in which he has grown, especially from the things that he came from as a Black man in America, from the South, growing up in South LA, like all the things that he's had to endure and the ways in which he is coming out of that and healing and becoming a better person. I think I'm proud of him for that. So shout out to him for the work that he's doing.
Shout out to him.
Mm-hmm.
That's all I wanted. I don't know. Now I've been thinking, I think because you said father figure, I'm thinking father figure in my head. I've been singing it for a minute. Because I'm crazy like that and I like George Michael. So yeah.
Thank you for that. Thank you for inserting that into the episode today.
Yes.
We appreciate you.
Of course. Is it? I mean, because we were so heavy for like an hour. So it's like, you gotta have some comedic relief. Jeez.
Sheesh.
But anyway,
excess baggage.
Yeah, shout out to y'all if y'all made it this whole episode, because I know that was deep and it's gonna touch some people in a certain way. And I just want you to know you're not alone, with either wound, whether it's a mother wound or father wound, like we all go through it.
We all in it.
And they've been through it as well. So,
absolutely.
So, don't worry.
It's going to be all right.
Yes, ma'am.
Well, that was another episode of Excess Baggage.
Follow us on Instagram and Facebook at Excess Baggage Pod. That's Excess Baggage POD. Be sure to like, subscribe, and review on the podcast app and Spotify.
And remember to pack light and keep it tight.
The show.